Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for another edition of Arkansans Ask. For the next 60 minutes, the Honorable Mike Beebe is joining us for what has been, I think, Governor, I calculate 32 somewhere of these broadcasts since you took office.
Yes.
8 years ago.
It's gone by in a hurry, Steve. It's hard to believe it's been 8 years, but the calendar says it's been 8 years, and so it has been.
Let's start with governance.
Sure.
Your successor has already been chosen, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some pretty big decisions to make. Now, you, even before the election, you were urging, even before November, you were urging the General Assembly, take another look at those tax cuts.
Yeah, you know, we, back in 2013, I told the folks, based upon the revenue forecasts, that I thought we could afford $100 million in tax cuts, and I supported those. And we did them. A portion of them were phased in the first year, and then the rest of them were phased in this year. But they passed an additional $40 or $50 million in tax cuts that would be effective next July that I thought they could not afford. The forecast didn't suggest that we would be able to do that. So I warned them at the time, and everyone said, well, you know, we'll have an opportunity to correct that because we'll be in session in January of 15, and if the forecast is correct, we'll have the opportunity to correct it. Actually, the forecast is a little better than we thought, so they're really not 50 million over, but I've suggested that about 28, 29 million of those tax cuts that haven't gone into effect yet at least be delayed for a year or two so that we could grow into that. And we'll see what the General Assembly does.
As always, Governor, we're taking questions from the public, and that number, toll-free, is 1-800-662-2386. Email questions are quite acceptable. paffairs@aetn.org, or you may tweet at AETN, #ARAsk. They're popping up on the screen there as we go. The private option, as enacted, made those tax cuts
possible. Yes.
Do you regret any second thoughts?
No, not at all. We, you know, the private option did a number of things, created 200,000 people.
Did you really have a choice? I mean, given the dynamics of the legislative session.
You're talking about with the tax cuts?
Right.
Oh, no, it was a give and take. It was, but I supported them. I don't back up from that. But yeah, it was a major impetus for many members of the General Assembly. I think ultimately the private option would have passed with or without the tax cuts, but who knows? I thought based upon the savings, and there's a really good argument. The private option really did save the state about $100 million in general revenue that otherwise went for uncompensated care and other things that were relieved by the private option. So, I mean, if you're going to save the state $100 million with a private option, the best thing to do with it was give it back to the people in the form of tax cuts. And that's what we did, and that's what I supported. I don't regret it at all. I don't regret the tax cuts. In fact, I've cut more taxes probably than any governor in history. When you think about the grocery tax, when you think about the cuts on manufacturers for utilities to try to be competitive with other states in terms of job creation. So it was $100 million in tax cuts that I thought we legitimately could afford, and we can.
Well, with November's election, there were some ladies and gentlemen elected who would not contest my depiction of their description of them as pretty doggone conservative, and they are absolutely adamantly, they say, opposed to the private option.
Sure.
Well, it's not, it won't be your baby in January. But how does that all, from the perspective of...
It makes it more difficult. What the viewers need to understand, and what I've tried to convince the New York Times and the LA Times and the Washington Post and everybody else, is when they talk about Arkansas and they talk about the private option, they don't emphasize the part of the story that I think is the real story, and that is it takes a 3/4 vote every year to be able to effectuate the private option, because it's an appropriation, and the appropriation requires a 3/4 vote. That's 75 out of 100 in the House, 27 out of 35 in the Senate. And Steve, 75% is hard to get for motherhood and apple pie, much less something that is controversial. So it was difficult the 2 times we did it, in 13 and we did it again in the fiscal session early in 2014, and barely made it with 75 votes. Now, having said that, that makes it in any given year difficult to do, and when you compound the issue with the number of folks who got elected in opposition to the private option, that obviously creates even bigger problems for Governor Hutchinson and for the legislature and for the private option.
Do you have any insight into Governor Hutchinson's thinking? He says it may be January, or at least January, maybe even February.
I wouldn't speak for Governor Hutchinson, but he's a smart guy. I think he knows what the ramifications are, both of doing it and not doing it. I think he's got a pretty good head on his shoulders. I'd be shocked if he didn't try to figure out a way to continue the private option, but I've been shocked before, so that's his call. He hasn't definitively stated anything to me personally, and so we'll just have to wait and see what his position is on it. But I suspect the ramifications of not doing it are pretty significant, not only with the budget, but with 200,000 people and with what it does to all the hospitals. I mean, it devastates every hospital, not just the small rural ones, but all the hospitals. Then you couple that with the fact that you got and most of those 200,000 people are working people. People that worked at C-stores and waitresses, and folks that worked at lower wages, but still were working, trying to take care of their families, and their employers didn't carry health insurance. Now, for the first time, these working folks have got health insurance. Well, that helps the rest of us, because overall, the insurance rates have gone down 2%. Now, some have gone up, some have gone down, but on balance, when you look at all the policies, Arkansas's health insurance rates are going down this next year, 2%. And for example, Louisiana didn't take it. The same insurance companies in Louisiana, 18% increase. So it won't just affect those 200,000 people. It'll affect the rest of us that have normal health insurance, because what actually happens, Steve, is when you show up and you don't have any insurance or an ability to pay, the hospital's still got to take care of you under the law. They still, under federal law, they still got to take care of you. And so that's uncompensated care. And they can't stay open giving stuff away free without doing something about it, so they shift costs to the rest of us, have forever, for 40 years, 50 years. So they shift costs to the rest of us that can pay or do have health insurance, and it jacks up our insurance rates. One of the hidden beauties of all this is the rest of the state that's not even involved in the private option are seeing the benefits of having that escalation in their own health care costs kind of at least level off, in some cases actually go down, because the hospitals are no longer giving as much uncompensated care away. I heard something about the number of uncompensated patients at UAMS has gone down from something like 13 or 14% to 2% in a year. I mean, that's huge, because that means they don't have to jack up everybody else's bills to everybody else's insurance companies to offset the losses for giving stuff away free. It's a huge deal.
The ideological argument against it, expansion of government, too much government to it.
Well, but that's a federal issue. I mean, and what I've said all along, you can hate Obamacare all you want to hate it. You can love Obamacare all you want to love it. However you feel about Obamacare, you want that change, you got to change it in Washington. The Arkansas General Assembly and the Arkansas governor has zero power to change that. None. And I know Mark Darr ran for lieutenant governor claiming he was going to stop all that. Well, you saw how that worked out. And, I mean, our voters are good, smart people, and they can figure out when somebody's BSing them. But you can't change the federal law in the Arkansas state capitol. So what do? You make the best of it. If you're going to have it, if we're going to pay for it anyway, because we are. We're paying for it with our taxes. Our hospitals are paying for it with a reduction in Medicare reimbursement rates. Now, people on Medicare don't get nervous. You're not losing your Medicare. But the amount of money that the federal government pays to hospitals for Medicare reimbursement has gone down to help pay for the private option, or to help pay for Medicaid expansion. If you don't take it, you're still paying for it anyway. Our taxpayers are paying for New York and California and all these other states. And now we got all these Republican governors across the country that have figured it out and doing the same thing we did.
Well, there's the fiscal argument, though, that is offered, which is right now we're getting I don't want to say a free ride.
Yeah.
But you're looking at 5% pretty soon. Ultimately 10% by what?
2020.
2020. 17 is the 5%.
Yeah.
Fiscal 17.
Yeah.
And then 10%. Which opponents of private option, including some of the existing members, say, sorry, that is not sustainable. We're looking at enormous outlays of state funds.
Well, there's some things they can do. Currently, we have, it's not a new tax, but we have an insurance premium tax on health care policy. So now all of a sudden they've got a new influx of money on these because of the way we did it on these policies. Since it's not straight Medicaid expansion, it's actual insurance policies, which creates a flow and a pool of money, which the legislature is wisely segregating and putting into a pot to be able to help defray those costs. Now, it won't defray all of it, but it'll go a long way toward defraying it.
How much... I talked to Mr. Senator Sanders and others of my colleagues,
Sure.
and talked to other members who were instrumental in,
Sure.
Republican members who were instrumental in adoption of the PO.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No.
I'm going to interrupt you and say this is a great example of Arkansans, most of whom in the legislature would have voted against Obamacare if they'd had a chance to vote, but pragmatically figuring out we got to make the best of whatever the situation is. And this is an example of Democrats and Republicans working together in the General Assembly in a way that we want Washington to work. People actually trying to solve problems and getting together and crossing party lines to figure out how you do the best for the Arkansas taxpayers, how you do the best for your own people. And that's why I'm so proud of the legislature. They actually gave a roadmap for those folks in Washington, if the people in Washington got enough sense to pay attention and listen to what the Arkansas Republicans and Democrats working together in the Arkansas General Assembly could figure out.
They would have said that, there's got to be some, at a minimum, some tinkering around the edges.
Sure.
Well, how much room to tinker is there?
I don't know. That'll be up to what their tinkering is. That'll be up to the governor's leadership and what he can do and what he can get approved from the federal government in terms of tinkering, because all of this is subject to federal approval.
You note the
That's
bipartisan...
how we got the federal approval.
Well, the across the aisle cooperation that made, the bipartisanship that made the private option possible in
Sure.
2 consecutive sessions.
Sure.
Do you feel that that's been threatened by what happened in November?
No. And the reason I don't think it's been threatened is I think we got enough folks that say you're going to take whatever hand you're dealt, whatever cards you're dealt, and try to figure out how Arkansas best benefits from that and how the Arkansas people and the Arkansas taxpayers best benefit by that. I don't know if there's 75%, but I think there's way more than a majority. Which brings up another question. Is the way more than the majority going to let a small minority, even though it only takes 26%, be the tail that wags the whole dog? I know when I was in the Senate, we wouldn't have allowed that. I don't know what this bunch will do. But if you've got 67, 69, 71 members of the House and 23, 24, 25 members of the Senate that believe this is the right policy, are they going to let 10 guys or 10 members stop it? I can't answer that question. I know what I'd do.
I don't know if you've ever been asked, but our mutual friend, Mr. Dumas, has advanced
the idea of 51%.
Yeah. What do you think of it?
I wouldn't try it.
Well, but you've studied it.
I've studied it, and he makes a good point. It's a question of first impression. I'm not sure he's wrong, but I'm dang sure not sure he's right. And I'm conservative, and I would stick to the conservative idea that let's do it the right way without a question of whether or not constitutionally or legally it creates a challenge.
Go for 75. Before we move on, sir, take a look at what happened. I mean, from the distance of 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
What happened?
Obama. It's all about Obama. And it's not just Arkansas. I mean, look, it happened across the country. The president's approval ratings are so low, and the attitude of the American people, and particularly Arkansans, was so anti-Obama that they threw out a lot of folks based upon just having a D by their name. Not just in the federal races, but on the state races as well. But Steve, it's not just Arkansas. I mean, It happened in Massachusetts, of all places. It happened in Maryland, of all places. It happened all over the place. It's not a phenomenon that was just applicable to Arkansas. The people of America have rejected President Obama and his policies to the point that you saw it in the election. And frankly, I don't even think it's a question. I think I'm not even equivocal about what I think happened. I feel that strongly that that's what happened.
Well, he's not a very lucky guy, or your party was not a terribly lucky guy. I mean, as November approached, we had an Ebola panic. We had, in the face of numbers, economic numbers anyway, which seemed to be, well, even today, the Dow and the S&P, I think, cracked above new records, new territory. Yeah. The numbers clearly were trending up. People didn't feel it.
Well, whether they felt it or not, and whatever else was happening, good or bad, that was or wasn't his fault, there was a general feeling across the country that had been there for some time that rejected his leadership and his policies, and even to the point that it transcended any good news, including the economy getting better. And you're right, there are some things. I mean, he inherited a pretty bad situation.
Beheadings overseas
but he inherited a bad situation in the economy when he came in, you know. The economy collapsed. We ended up with the worst recession in my lifetime, but it started the year before he got there. It started in 08, the year he got elected in November of 08, but it started all through 08. But that's what happens. You ride the back of that tiger, you better ride it and not get in its mouth.
What happened in November? Do you see that as a permanent realignment?
It depends. Nothing in this business is permanent. It's all cyclical. If you'll recall, in 06, there were huge Democratic gains on both the congressional level here as well as in the state legislature. In 08, Republicans couldn't even field a candidate against Senator Pryor. It changed in 10. It changed in 2010, 2 years after the president was in office, and it continued to build in 12, and it continued to build in 14. And anecdotally, if you talk to somebody, I mean, I don't know how many friends of mine and even just acquaintances that I see. I saw a guy yesterday in El Paso, and he said, it's all about Obamacare.
White County, Arkansas.
It's all about Obamacare. I mean, and that's, you know, when people tell you that, you believe them.
Some questions from the audience here, and let's go to some of these. And here's from Washington County, the E-University program. Your thoughts on that?
Well,
clearly the faculty across the state has some reservations about
and you know, I don't know that it's not a good idea for certain students to be able to, particularly a lot of those students that already have a number of hours and they're older in life and they've got a family and they're working and they need to go finish up their degree. But I think they've got to be, I think what the faculties are worried about is what is it going to do cutting into the normal traditional residential. But you know, that's why you got a board of trustees and a president of the university to make those decisions. And if the president of the university says something, then those chancellors better say okay. Or else why have a president of the university?
Well, you have a voice into this to some extent. Well, you're an ASU. You're absolutely famously and appropriately devoted to ASU.
Yeah.
To what extent, thinking back on your undergraduate years,
yeah,
when you got that BA over at ASU, over at Jonesboro, would you have preferred earning some of that credit online, or was the on-campus experience, how essential was that to you, to your
the on-campus experience was absolutely essential to me. I was a 17-year-old, normal 17-year-old kid, and the structure of the campus, the structure of the residence, the structure of being there every day probably helped me get through those first 2 years when I didn't have enough maturity to do it otherwise. But that points back to what I said earlier. If you're going to do it, some of the folks that are more mature, it's a better fit for them than your traditional student just getting out of high school who might need the structure of being actually on campus.
Another question from a viewer here, and it goes to the 2014 election. And it's been argued elsewhere that given what happened, the Democrats might have been better served had they, rather than attempt to distance themselves from Mr. Obama, they would have embraced him, the program.
I've heard the argument. I mean, my opinion hasn't changed. I think there was a general antipathy in the country at large, and in Arkansas in particular, against the president and his policies. So I don't know what would have changed that.
Yep. When, from Benton County, why is it when you are underpaid by, this is a federal question, I think, Social Security insurance, that your other benefits stop?
I don't know.
Just rolling these, I don't understand. We're just,
I don't
just
understand the
rolling these
question. I think if you're under 66, then and you draw Social Security, it gets docked by what your other income is. But if you're over 66 and over, as I understand it, you can make all the money you want to make from outside sources without it affecting the amount of Social Security you draw. That's my understanding.
County unknown, but I believe, sir, that you have recommended a 1% raise?
A COLA, 1%. We've effectuated.
State employees we're talking about here.
Yeah, we've actually effectuated the 1% COLA for state employees.
Cigarette tax, is it too high, too low?
It's too high for the folks that are smoking.
Right.
But, you know, the cigarette tax was specifically devoted to health care and specifically devoted to the statewide trauma system, which Arkansas was the only one that didn't have one. And so, and that money's never been stolen, raided, siphoned off, or given to anything. The legislature has kept faith, and I've kept faith with folks that when it was passed, we said it was going to go for the Med Center's Northwest Arkansas branch and for the trauma system and the trauma center, and that's where it continues to go. And it's a pretty effective trauma system across the state. It gets you to the right hospital with the right doctors on duty at that time without going to 2 or 3 places before you find out where you're supposed to be. Saves lives, saves seriousness of injuries. Yeah, it's working.
A question might have come from Northwest Arkansas, or actually anywhere, but it comes from Union. Should your administration have been, we've talked about this before, should your administration have been either ADEQ or your own executive office, been more proactive before the Cargill hog farm went into
yeah, well, that's all hindsight. If we would have had the legal authority to stop it, I would have stopped it. And I keep telling folks the same thing. It was a general permit, and under existing law, which I think will be changed, under what they applied for, they were entitled to the permit. Now, what I've done is I've put a moratorium, which I'm not sure I legally can, but I've done it anyway, on anything new. And we have put extensive monitoring around the farm so that if at the first hint of any problem with the Buffalo watershed, then we would seek a court injunction to stop it.
A lot of people were saying, including me, everybody, it's wonderful that we can be surprised all the time. I thought, like a lot of other people who supposedly knew what they were talking about, that one of the 5 initiated acts or ballot issues would succeed, and that was the minimum wage, and the other 4 would go down in flames. Wrong.
Well, I was in the same boat you were.
Why? What happened there?
I don't have an explanation.
We seem to have a no mentality in terms of rejecting the established order, and then these.
One of the things that has been suggested on one of the most controversial ones, which was to extend term limits, was coupled with stronger ethics laws. And the first part of the initiative that the voters got to read and got to see was dealing with ethics, not with extending term limits. And there's a lot of talk. I don't know there's any empirical data, but there's a lot of thought that caused them to vote for that, when had it been the other way around, if term limits had been on the front of the ballot, it might not have passed. But that's talk, and I don't have any definitive answer to that.
The term limits aspect of it was, of course, criticized by U.S. term limits, or the term limits opponents.
Yeah, and I'm not going back to the Senate, incidentally, because under this new term.
All right, but another 2 years were tacked on to the potential, in most cases 2 years, tacked on to the potential for a member to serve.
Well,
went from
it's more significant than that. It's more significant than that. 2 was the max if somebody served 6 years in the House and could end up beating their senator or having a Senate seat and end up 8 years over there.
Right.
As a practical matter, that was more difficult. After 6, the odds are you'd be running against one of your incumbent senators and you wouldn't win. So 6 was privilege for a lot of people, not all, but for a lot of members of the House was pretty much it. It wasn't 6 plus 8 as a practical matter.
No, I don't.
But you're right. Theoretically, 16 is only 2 years more than 6 plus the 8 if all things worked to the maximum for that potential office holder.
And in the right year, if you drew a 2-year term,
yeah, you could get 16. It wouldn't be any different.
You're right. Well,
actually, you could get
18.
That's right. The way, but now that's a whole nother show on the way redistricting works and drawing for 2-year terms versus 4-year terms. We don't have enough time to talk about all that.
Did you privately approve of that, or publicly approve of the 2-year extension?
No, I didn't.
Or would you just take the lid off?
You know, I never have been. I never have been for term limits.
No.
I was always opposed to term limits. I didn't like the way this one was done, though. Shrouded with the ethics stuff, and I thought that was. I didn't like that.
Do you think that people who, this is from Washington County, who got food stamps should be able to get their food tax-free?
Well, I mean, food tax, no, I don't know. I mean, do they get their food tax free on food? That's a federal program.
Yeah, the people are speaking there. Concerning the changeover.
But the food tax is gone anyway, just about. I've got it lowered to 1.5, and from 6, and we have automatically in 18, it cuts down to just that 1/8 that the people put on for the conservation tax that the people
can't move that one off.
No.
Well, I mean, save it for a constitutional amendment. Here's a Crawford County viewer who notes that the U.S. Supreme Court, and I don't know if we mentioned this earlier or not, but the U.S. Supreme Court might do the work of Obamacare opponents for them.
Yeah, they've taken the case, and as I understand it, they've taken that part of it that requires the mandate. But it may end up taking the whole thing, and what the law is, as determined by the Supreme Court, will be the law of the land. That could obviate all the other arguments.
You stated that you probably aren't running for any other office.
No, I didn't say probably. I said I'm not.
Well, you not even a fraction of wiggle room there? I mean, you know, maybe the Searcy City Council or the White County Quorum Court or something, just to keep your hand in.
No. Look, I don't want to get sentimental about all this, but there is a lot of nostalgia in your last month and a half of office after 32 years of being involved. But I've had a great ride. The people have been better to me than anybody could have ever asked for. I am eternally grateful to the voters, the people of Arkansas, 20 years in the Senate, 4 as AG, and then 8 as governor. There's nothing that could top what the people have let me do. It's time to go home. I wish everybody well that's in office or will be office. I wish Governor Hutchinson well. I'll cooperate. If he wants any cooperation, I'll cooperate any way I can, short of being involved in any full-time activity. I mean, he wants to call and talk on the phone, and he has, and I'm more than happy to do that. But, you know, it's time for Ginger and I to be able to go enjoy whatever time is left.
Don't have the county, but this is an 870 zip code or area code. If you could snap your fingers, the caller asked, and impose an efficiency, what would it be? A single example of that you could move the state forward in terms of governmental efficiency.
Well, the first thing I'd do is snap my fingers and stop that restriction that public schools can't be tied to RON as a method, as a cheaper methodology of being able to get broadband proliferation to all our public schools. That's the first thing I'd do if I could snap my fingers.
You've recommended some efficiencies there already.
Yeah, I've recommended precisely what I just said.
Well, I mean, in terms of staff reductions.
Oh, in DIS?
Yes.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And that'll be up to the next governor and the legislature as to whether they want to follow my recommendations, but you bet.
The matter of pardons and parole, number of questions tonight.
Sure.
One from Pike, here's another from Pulaski, and I've seen one from Phillips, and they're just kind of coming in. Touchy subject because one of them involves your son.
Well, let me say this. I'm not going to treat my son worse than I treat everybody else. And I'm not treating him better. And people, most people understand that. Let me tell you what my philosophy has been on pardons and commutations from day one. I'm very conservative and very strict on commutations. I believe people ought to serve whatever their sentence is, their time, their probation, their parole, whatever it is. And so I think I've granted a total of 8 commutations in 8 years out of the thousands that have been requested. And usually it's a situation where there was just such a miscarriage that it was easy to see, or somebody that's so old and sick and infirm that them continuing to stay in the penitentiary is not doing anybody any good. On the other hand, I've been really liberal on pardons after they have completed their sentences, and particularly if it's a nonviolent crime. So I've granted something over 700 pardons in 8 years, and the bulk of them have been young people that were convicted of drugs. Most of them marijuana, but some of them have been other drugs as well. And after they've finished their sentence or finished their probation or finished their parole or paid all their fines, and some period of time, I don't have a magic number, but usually at least 4 or 5 years has elapsed, and they haven't been convicted of something else, I believe in second chances. And that's what I'm doing for my son. It's no different than what I've done for over 700 others. But because he's my son, there's a whole lot more scrutiny about it. And there's a whole lot more, if he hadn't been my son, this would have been like the other 700. Nobody had ever said a word about it. But he is my son, and he has to live with that. And I feel a lot of guilt that he has to go through what he has to go through because he's embarrassed, his mother's embarrassed, I'm embarrassed. I was embarrassed when it happened back in 2003. He had over 2 ounces of marijuana, he was guilty, he paid the price, and that was 11 years ago. And I'm not gonna treat him worse than I treat other people that are similarly situated that I've granted literally hundreds and hundreds of pardons for over the past 8 years.
At the end of the 8 years, sir, you note that you've been pretty conservative in some aspects of executive clemency.
I've been real conservative on letting people out early.
Right.
Real liberal on giving pardons after they finish their sentence.
Any second thoughts about it? Do you think you were too conservative sometimes?
You mean on letting them out early?
Clemency, right. Commutations. Clemency.
No, I really do believe in the system. Now, there have been, those 8 that I've granted were situations where it was pretty dramatic. I know the first one I ever granted was down in southwest Arkansas, and it was a black kid who got don't hold me to these because I don't remember all the specifics, but he got something like 30 years as a co-defendant with a white kid who got like 6 years because they had different jury trials, or maybe one pled and one went to a jury, and they were both guilty of the same conduct. So I reduced his sentence to the same as his co-defendant for doing the same thing. That's the kind of thing that I think my obligation to correct some injustice was required. But that's an exception. I usually pay homage to the jury system and to the entire criminal justice system. They can make mistakes, of course they can. And that's what that's part of the obligation I've got as governor with the commutation power. But I've been real strict on it, and I think I've been relatively consistent. I look at each case, so I do look at the facts and reserve the right to make a different decision on lowering somebody's sentence, but I hadn't done it very often.
Here's a tweak question, sir.
Yeah.
In 2012, there was talk about a 40 tollway from West Memphis to Little Rock. Your thought? And again, we're seeing a revival, at least to some extent anyway.
Well,
tolling the road.
My understanding of that is the feds won't let you toll a road that's already been paid for by the taxpayers. It has to be a new road. So unless there's some kind of federal waiver, I don't know how I-40 from Little Rock to Memphis gets improved with a toll. I think the feds could waive that, but I think that would be a prerequisite, because the general rule, as I understand it right now, is if it's an existing highway that the taxpayers have already paid for, you can't toll it without some kind of special federal permission. I will tell you this. I-40 from Little Rock to Memphis is the worst traffic we've got in Arkansas. And part of the reason is, if you think about it, it's got all the east-west traffic, the west coast to the east coast traffic. Plus it gets all the Dallas and Houston traffic going to Chicago, because they come up I-30 and then they get on 40 east to go up 55. So you got both the east-west truck traffic primarily and the north-south truck traffic for that 150 miles or so between Little Rock and Memphis. And it's in bad need of 6 lanes. But I don't know what the answer is right now.
This is along the lines of, again, of snapping your fingers, but a Benton County viewer wants to know, is there something about government as you're departing it that keeps you up nights?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I get asked the question, what's the hardest part of my job? And it's an easy answer. The good news is I hadn't had to do it lately. But the hardest part of this job is calling a wife or a mother of someone in the armed forces that was killed in action. And I don't even have to make the first call. The Department of Defense does that. So I don't even make the call until a couple days later. But it is the hardest thing. And whether they're regular forces or whether they're our National Guard folks, back in 07, 08, 09, and 10, we had a significant amount of deployment of Arkansans into harm's way in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And there's not much you can say other than and so far I haven't had to call a husband. We haven't lost a female. But I've had to call fathers, I've had to call mothers, I've had to call wives. And there's not much you can say except to express on behalf of 3 million Arkansans our condolences and our sympathies, and offer whatever help, albeit as small as it is, to that loved one. That's by far what keeps you up at night and what bothers me the most.
The 16 cycle is underway.
Yeah, they're already campaigning.
It started before. Well, even the maneuvering starts 4-6 years early.
Mm-hmm.
Our former First Lady of Arkansas, mm-hmm. one of Mrs. Beebe's predecessors,
yep,
has to make a decision pretty soon.
Yeah.
I think there's a consensus she could do pretty well in the Democratic primary. She could probably take the delegates.
Yeah.
How would she do in November, assuming she would be the nominee?
Well, I think it depends on a couple things. One, where is she with regard to some of the president's current policies, which are unpopular? Two, what's the mood of the country with regard to what's changed, if anything? And three, whether some of these votes in places like Massachusetts and Maryland and Illinois, was it an anomaly, was it short-lived, or is it of a longer duration? So I think there's some of those factors that will enter into how well she would do. I think she'd be a formidable candidate.
I didn't check before. We drove over here tonight, and I meant to. Do you remember what your first gubernatorial campaign cost? 8 years ago?
As I recall, we raised about $8 million, but we had some left over. I think it went to the inaugural or went back to the party or went somewhere, but pretty close to between $6 and $8 million. And now it's exploded way beyond that.
Yeah, well,
because at the time what I raised was the record.
You've got now, even with the initiated act, holding down direct corporate country, right. The cost, it's just going to intensify. It's going to just.
Well, you raised something, and it's really a pet peeve of mine, and I know the Supreme Court ruled that way. I think it's terrible, absolutely terrible, that certain groups can spend unlimited money only attacking And it's on both sides. It's not just Republicans, it's Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else. But as I understand the Supreme Court ruling, you can't spend unlimited money for a candidate. But you can spend unlimited money against a candidate, trashing somebody. And I think that's so counterproductive, and I think it turns people off, and I think people were sick of the ads. I think they were sick of the negativity by everybody. I don't think it's healthy for our democracy. But the Supreme Court has allowed it, and I don't know who's going to stop it. It's under the freedom of speech stuff. But I think it's one of the worst things that's happened in our political environment. And so I think what you're going to see is some restrictions, as you pointed out, on what can be raised for a candidate, with no restrictions on what can be raised against a candidate. So you're going to see even more negativity. You're going to see even more ads trashing somebody. And, you know, a good portion of those things strained everybody's credibility. I mean, there were some of those ads that suggested stuff that, I mean, it's just awful.
There have been, all things considered, comparatively small amount of this in the third branch. I mean, it's already
yeah, and that's awful.
Is the judiciary the next battlefield?
Yes, and that's awful. We hold our judges to a higher standard than we do governors and legislators in terms of how they conduct themselves to get elected in those states where they are elected. And with what's happened with the money is it's created situations where, frankly, it's tarnished the judiciary and tarnished certain candidates in the judiciary. And as somebody that grew up in practicing law, I hate to see that. I mean, you just saw, I saw a blurb on the news or something this evening where a civil suit's been filed now against Maggio, the guy that got kicked off the bench here in Conway, in conjunction with his reduction of an award because he took money from, at least it's alleged, he took money from the owner of the nursing home that he reduced the verdict in favor of. I mean, all that's tied to money and contributions. Whether that's true or not, whether that case will be successful or not, whether there's any correlation or not, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for the judiciary at large. But you know, I've always been pretty candid. I mean, you ask me questions and I always tell you what I think. I've been doing it for longer than 8 years since I've been governor. And sometimes people don't like what I say, but I had a reputation and have a reputation for doing that. And I'm not going to stop now. I think that stinks.
Across the country there, well, we've had a de-emphasis on marijuana enforcement, not on bails, but on small.
Yeah.
At the federal level, a number of states have basically
opened it up.
Opened it up.
Well, here's the problem with that. The feds have not decriminalized it. They're just not enforcing it.
Right.
And so you got Washington and Colorado and Oregon and Washington, D.C. I think those four entities have voted, the people have voted, to say that recreational marijuana is legal. And yet, those people could be subject to being prosecuted by the federal government if the federal government ever changed their mind. If you get a U.S. attorney that says, you know, I want to make an example. So you got folks doing what they think is legal based on their own state law that's illegal on the federal. It needs to be coordinated. If they're going to change it, the feds need to get it changed too. And if they're not, they need to stop it. They need to enforce it.
Something that by and large began during your administration because of the advances in technology was the explosion of natural gas exploration.
Yeah.
It was underway, I think, under your predecessor to some extent.
To some extent.
It really caught fire during, really intensified during your administration.
Right.
Fracking. There is some rebellion against that.
Yeah. I'm
questioning of that by environmental.
Sure. And you got a balance. I believe in a balance between taking care of the economics and protecting the environment. What I've always said is, more often than not, you can do things to reconcile those what appear to be conflicting interests, and you ought to do that. You ought to reconcile it. and we've tried to do that. Now, if it gets to the point where they're irreconcilable, where you got to choose one over the other, I say protect the environment and take care of posterity. But in the issue of fracking, what we've done is we have restricted the ability of to frack under certain watersheds, virtually every watershed. We have also restricted and put a moratorium on the deep injection wells where they dispose of that stuff down to 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 feet, because I believe that's what's causing seismic activity, earthquakes. And you remember, Steve, we had quite a bit of earthquakes for a period of time in the fracking area that were around those deep injection disposal wells. When we stopped that, the regular wells don't go down 10 or 12,000 feet. The regular drilling goes down 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. When we stopped the deep injection wells, the seismic activity decreased significantly. Now, there's still some, but it's, so those are the things you have to do to try to protect the environment and be cognizant of that and still understand the jobs that are created and the economic boom that comes from that technology. And let me tell you something else about fracking. And this is a big deal. Before that technology was made feasible, America had a 20-year supply of natural gas. And the only significant natural gas reserves in the world were in two places, Iran and Russia. If you think OPEC was hard to deal with on oil, can you imagine being held hostage by Iran and Russia, two countries that really don't like us very much and we don't like them very much? Imagine where the American economy and what our national interest and national security would be if we were dependent on Iran and Russia for our natural gas. Now, the other thing that's happened is that fracking technology has opened up oil. Not just natural gas, but then they discovered there are in a lot of these shale formations, they can now feasibly extract not just natural gas, but oil, and it's particularly true in the Dakotas. And part of the reason our gasoline prices have fallen is now America is producing so much more oil that we're not dependent on OPEC near what we were, and so the cost of a barrel of oil has gone down because of this technology. Now, do we need to protect the environment? Absolutely. Do we have an obligation to make sure our children, our grandchildren, inherit the good things about who we are as a nation and the natural beauty of not just Arkansas, but our country? Of course we do. But if we can make those things in a way that we can protect that and still exploit the kind of technology and the economic benefits that come from the fracking, then we've lowered our dependence on foreign people that don't like us very much. We save lives because we don't have to send soldiers into harm's way in places that we shouldn't be sending our soldiers. Our national security is improved, and our economy results in $2.69 gasoline instead of $3.69 gasoline as a result of what just happened. I mean, you got me stirred up, but that's the way I look at it.
Well, we've had a number of questions from viewers, sir, about Second Amendment issues. It comes to mind anyway, this one, in this saying that got you.
What?
Early on in your, I think you're advertising it to some extent in your first campaign for governor, you emphasized there's no need for additional gun legislation, no gun laws. In your first term, you lost a dear friend, a former Senate colleague, Senator Gwatney.
But it wasn't based upon stopping certain weapons. That guy came in there with a pistol.
I understand, sir, but did that in any way alter your thinking about the advisability of it?
No, I feel guilt about that one too, because I asked Bill Gwatney to be the chairman of the party. And he happened to be at that office when that crazy guy came in there. He was never at that office. I mean, he wasn't the executive director. He was there 30 minutes a week. And for him to have actually been there, that guy didn't know that. He just came in here wanting to do something bad. And the odds of Bill Gwatney being there at that time are just so astronomically small. But if I hadn't asked him to be chairman of the party, he wouldn't have been there. And he'd still be alive today. But as much as I love Bill Gwatney, and I do, and as much guilt as I feel for the fact that if I hadn't asked him to take on that responsibility, he'd never been there, that doesn't mean you change what you think is good policy for the whole state and for the whole country based upon a crazy incident from a crazy guy that killed one of your best friends. I just don't think you change the laws based on that, because changing the law wouldn't have stopped that.
A Lawrence County viewer said, well, first I would note that we've got orals before the Supreme Court Thursday on Judge Piazza's same-sex marriage ban strike down. And a U.S. District Judge, I think within hours, will hear arguments in a more or less a companion suit.
Yeah.
Has your thinking, and a Lawrence County viewer wants to know if your thinking at all has changed on that?
No.
Civil unions?
I don't think anybody should be discriminated against in the workplace or in accommodations or anything else based upon their sexual preference. But traditionally, I grew up believing that marriage is between a man and a woman, and I still do. But I don't think that people should be discriminated against in economics or the workplace or any other way. My feelings have changed on that aspect of it, much stronger than they used to be.
To lack of support for, I can't make the question. Okay, this one. What if you could take a second swing at a gubernatorial tenure? Would you go about it differently?
I got to tell you,
what lessons would you offer?
I'm sure I could find mistakes that I made that I would correct. I mean, I'm human. I'm sure we've messed up stuff. But I got to tell you, on the whole, this has been a wonderful 8 years. We have done things I never thought Arkansas could do. We've climbed the rankings in education. I don't want this to sound like a campaign speech, but the fact of the matter is we've done things that people thought Arkansas could never do. And we've done them the right way, and we've done them, and it's not just me. You got to give the legislature credit. A lot of credit goes to the Supreme Court. They've done some things that have given us courage that we might not have otherwise had. So, I mean, it's a collective effort, not the least of which, when the people have been as supportive to me as they've been, it gives me a bully pulpit and a way to encourage, influence, cajole, beg, plead, threaten members of the General Assembly that I couldn't have done without that overwhelming support from the voters across the state. So do I have any regrets about the way I've been treated or what we've done? No, I really don't. Are there probably instances we could go back and try to figure out that I could have done things better? Sure. Everybody can do that. Everybody can do better. But on the whole, I'm really, really gratified about where Arkansas is. One of the things I've always said, because school kids used to ask me this all the time, now the media has started doing it in the last 6 or 8 months, what is the thing you're most proud of? And there's not one of those things. I mean, all of those things I'm proud of. Climbing the rankings in per capita income, climbing the rankings in education, being one of 4 states that didn't get in trouble during the recession fiscally, creating jobs. I mean, all those things I think I'm very proud of. But the one thing I hope I've done is, more than anything else, is a nebulous thing, which is we instill in our people an attitude that we can do anything, a swagger, not a negative Texas swagger, not an arrogant, obnoxious swagger, but a self-confident swagger that Arkansas can stand up to and compete with anybody else in this country, and that we have and we have demonstrated the ability that you never have to say thank God for Mississippi again. I get tired of hearing, we still have people that say that, and there's no reason to say that. You need to be mad at Maryland because they're first in education, we're only 5th. So I hope we have instilled in our people what we try to instill in our children, and that is this kind of self-confidence that allows our folks to be able to do anything.
Why don't you whisper in Mr. Hutchinson's ear right now?
Huh?
Why don't you whisper in his ear right now?
I don't have to whisper. He's probably watching the program.
Well, I'm just metaphorical. What? Don't do this and do this, or do this. What would you tell him? Based on your experience.
Well, I already told him some things not to do that he ignored during the campaign. You remember when I ran, one of the things I said was I want to under-promise and over-deliver. And I was under some pressure, especially in '06, not as much in '10, to match some promises that were made to get elected. And I refused to do that. I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I think we should do. This is what I'm going to try to do. But I can't promise you that, because there are things that could happen or things I may not know right now that would change my opinion. So here's my platform. Here's my policy. Here's what I want to get done, but I can't promise you, because I could change my mind, or there could be factors that say you can't do that. So I think you're better off, and I think the voters appreciate it more, if you tell them the truth and under-promise and then over-deliver later. And then if you can't deliver it, at least you haven't broken your promise.
With that, Governor, we're out of time. I got to wrap it up.
Thanks for 8 years.
Well, thank you, sir, for coming in over the 8 years. All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next year with a new administration.
Arkansans Ask Governor Mike Beebe is underwritten by the Arkansas State Employees Association, Incorporated, an organization of state employees working toward the betterment of state government.